Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something darker than usual. The glow from your screen is the only light you should be allowing into the room right now. Settle in. Let the sound of my voice be the only thing you focus on. Outside, maybe the rain whispers against your window, or perhaps the power hums low in the nearby transformer. A faint, metallic thrumming that always feels like an electrical ghost waiting to jump out. We're going deep into the kind of fear that doesn't just scare you, it rewires your brain. It's the kind of chilling uncertainty that makes you question everything you thought was settled, like whether or not you are truly alone in the dark. If you hear a gentle knocking behind you, a soft tap 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 in the silence, just ignore it. It's probably nothing. Probably. So, before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you're brave enough to handle what's coming. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there in the comments below. It's comforting to know we're all sinking into this dread together. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe keep one candle burning, and let's begin tonight's haunting together. The story starts exactly where most good ghost stories, or cryptid stories, or any stories that chip away at your sanity often start, with family. You are sitting across from your cousin, Finn, at his slightly scorched aluminum picnic table. It's late summer, and the air still holds the damp scent of the recent thunderstorm. Finn, usually so grounded, so annoyingly skeptical about everything from UFOs to your grandmother's famous lemon meringue pie, has a strange light in his eyes. He is telling you a story, or maybe a confession, about the Sierra Sentinel. You listen as Finn describes the towering, granite-faced canyon woods just a few hours north of the city. He'd gone up there, he says, to check on an old, forgotten timber cabin his family once owned. A cabin that stands precariously close to the edge of the official National Wilderness Area boundary. He was alone, just him and his rusty sedan, parked on a dusty turnout. The story he tells is rambling at first, about the quiet, the smell of pine and damp earth, the way the sound seemed to die prematurely in that valley. But then his voice drops, achieving that ASMR whisper quality that instantly pulls you in, making you lean closer, making the hairs on your arm stand up even before the really spooky part arrives. He tells you he saw something, not a bear, not a deer, not a wolf. He's an experienced hunter, a woodsman, and he emphasizes this detail repeatedly, almost pleading for your belief. It was an impossible shape, he insists, towering, moving with a fluid, terrifying efficiency between the shadows of the massive ponderosa pines. He describes it as having the mass of a large, stocky man, but covered in dark, matted hair, a kind of charcoal brown that absorbed the failing sunlight. It wasn't until he saw its gait, the powerful, deliberate bipedal walk, that the word finally surfaced in his mind: Sasquatch. Finn swears to you that it watched him. It didn't menace him, didn't roar or scream, but simply stood, perhaps 100 yards away, and stared. The sheer size was what got him a creature that massive, completely silent, utterly aware. When he recounts the moment, you see a flicker of genuine terror in his eyes, a terror that seems too authentic to be manufactured for a good anecdote. You feel a little shiver, the kind that whispers of sleep paralysis. It's an eerie or odd fact that during a sleep paralysis episode, many people report feeling an oppressive, terrifying presence in the room, often an unseen figure standing or sitting on their chest, a phenomenon known as the incubus or old hag. Researchers still argue whether these visions are purely neurological, a glitch between sleep and wakefulness, or if there's a deeper psychological archetype at play, tapping into ancient fears of being watched while vulnerable. You remind yourself that Finn is wide awake, drinking iced tea, and you are sitting in broad daylight. Still, the emotional tone of his story, the genuine fear, captures your imagination. You dismiss it, of course. You nod, you sip your drink, and you tell him, maybe with a nervous chuckle, that he must have been mistaken, that the light plays tricks in the deep woods, that perhaps it was a bear standing up, obscured by the foliage. It seems far more likely than the idea of an unknown species of ape creature surviving just a few hours from a major metropolitan area. It must be a mistake, but there's a part of you, a tiny, dark, flickering space in your mind that holds onto his story like a strange, magnetic burr. You shouldn't have doubted him. You realize now, in this second-person reflection, how easily you dismissed a terror that was deeply genuine. You wonder if that initial skepticism, that need to rationalize, is exactly what makes you so vulnerable to what is coming next. You still haven't asked him what happened to the old timber cabin, that initial flicker of doubt, that seed of uncomfortable possibility planted by Finn, doesn't dissipate. It takes root and begins to grow. Watered by your memories, you find yourself thinking about the woods behind your old house, the place that was your entire universe when you were younger. You remember that vast, dark sprawl of trees, a genuine wilderness that started just beyond the perfectly manicured grass of your backyard. It wasn't a small park. It was an authentic, sprawling forest that stretched for miles, ending only when it met the sheer, impossible rock face of the remote foothills. The woods, you recall, were a constant source of both excitement and unease. They were your playground, yes, the stage for countless camping ventures and games of imagination. But they also held a profound, unsettling silence. When you stepped off the worn path, the human whirled the sounds of cars. The distant drone of the neighbor's lawnmower simply evaporated. You remember the topography with a strange, cinematic clarity. The deep, winding streams where the water always ran icy cold, even in July. The rusted, decaying entrances of abandoned mines that your father strictly forbade you from exploring, and those eerie, half-collapsed wooden cabins, the ruins of forgotten homesteads, sinking back into the earth, their windows like empty, staring eyes. It's an odd fact that old, abandoned places often trigger a psychological phenomenon known as the uncanny valley in observers when a place, like a doll or a robot, looks almost human or almost functional, but fails in a subtle, disturbing way. It produces profound revulsion. Similarly, these derelict cabins, almost homes, but clearly dead, evoke a primal sense of danger, the feeling that something went horribly wrong here, and you're standing in the aftermath. You step back in time, remembering the way you used to peer into those darkened doorways. The air inside always feeling colder and heavier. You used to spend hours out there, pretending to be a pioneer or a desperate gold prospector, but now, filtered through Finn's terrifying anecdote, those same familiar landmarks take on a sinister hue. The deep shade beneath the canopy suddenly feels less like a shelter and more like a hiding place for something enormous. The babbling stream, which you once navigated by hopping across mossy stones, now sounds like a desperate rush, covering up the quiet movements of something large and secretive. You recall a real-world horror, a persistent folklore from the Appalachian Mountains, the stories of the knot deer or skinwalkers that are said to mimic human voices and move with an unnatural, broken-jointed gait to lure lost hikers deeper into the woods. Researchers still argue whether these stories are purely cultural warnings, parables about staying on the trail, or if they reflect misidentifications of large predators, or even psychotic breaks brought on by exhaustion and dehydration in the vast wilderness. You remind yourself that Finn saw a bipedal creature, not a broken deer, but the common thread is the same. The forest is actively hostile. It wants you. That memory of the forest, once comforting, now feels like a vast, patient prison. You realize that your entire early youth was spent playing in the backyard of an undetected animal, right at the doorstep of the wild. You wonder, thinking back on all your camping ventures, all the nights spent sleeping in a thin nylon tent in the woods, if you were ever truly alone. Did those enormous eyes, the ones Finn described, ever peer at the weak glow of your lantern through the thicket? Did they mistake your rustling sleeping bag for the movement of prey? This connection, this knowledge that the creature Finn claims to have seen exists in the very biome you called home, sparks an uncomfortable shift. The theoretical fear becomes personal. The distant cryptid is now a close neighbor. You feel a creeping sense of inevitability, as if the story Finn told wasn't just a warning, but a prelude. The stage is set. The curtain is about to rise. The prelude begins subtly, just like all good hauntings do. It's a brisk fall night. The scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves hangs heavy in the air. You're back at your childhood home, and your father, whom you call the chief, is preparing one of his perfect bonfires. Suddenly, Finn arrives, not for any particular reason other than to simply visit. It feels less like a casual visit and more like a fateful convergence. The three of you, your dad, and Finn spend the evening settled beneath the stars. Huddled around the growing campfire in the backyard, the chief is meticulous, a true believer in the art of the perfect fire. He has spent the afternoon meticulously cutting and stacking old pine wood, arranging the logs into a perfect conical circle. The arrangement is flawless, almost architectural. As the fire catches, it doesn't just burn, it rises, casting a vibrant, dancing light that pushes back the oppressive curtain of the surrounding darkness. Above you, the smoke curls into a monochrome cloud, briefly piercing the star-studded night sky. It's in this intimate, firelit circle that the atmosphere shifts from cozy to charged. Finn, already seated, his shadow stretching and warping on the grass, looks at you with that familiar, slightly unsettling glint in his eye. You know what they use pine wood for, right, boy? He asks, his voice low and gravelly, perfectly suited for the ASMR whisper track of a horror story. You shake your head slowly, already sensing the dark turn this is about to take. He gives you a snarky, knowing grin. Coffins, a pine wood box, 6 feet down, he says, drawing out the final words for maximum chilling effect. He laughs, a harsh, sudden sound that feels too loud against the backdrop of the crackling fire. And then he throws another log onto the flames. The sudden burst of sparks, momentarily obscuring his face. This macabre joke, this strange fascination with the morbid, is classic Finn. He's an odd fellow, you reflect, eccentric and prone to dark humor. But he's also fiercely loyal, trustworthy, and reliable. You recall countless times he's come to your rescue, driving out in the middle of a blizzard to fix your broken down vehicle with his inherent country wisdom, never asking for anything in return. He is the rock in your life, the one who can fix the unfixable. It is precisely this combination, the odd, dark sensibility mixed with absolute reliability, that makes his Sasquatch story so difficult to completely discard. If anyone is reliable enough to accurately recount an improbable horror, it's Finn. You remember a real-world horror story, the tale of the Watcher House in New Jersey, where a family received cryptic, terrifying letters from an unseen neighbor who claimed to be observing them and their family rituals. Researchers still argue whether the letters were a genuine threat from a disturbed individual, a strange, elaborate hoax, or an example of a rare psychological disorder known as folie à deux, where a delusion is shared between two closely associated people. Here, the paranoia begins small, with a dark joke and a creeping discomfort. The fact that pine wood is indeed a common material for inexpensive caskets, often referred to as pauper's pine, is an odd fact that adds a layer of eerie realism to Finn's joke. The simplicity and speed of a pine box burial contrast sharply with the elaborate, ceremonial nature of death, suggesting a sudden, unprepared end. The heat of the fire is comforting. The stars are brilliant, but the atmosphere is suddenly charged with a brittle tension. You realize that in the presence of this fire, this source of light and life, you are talking about death and confinement. It feels like a moment of ritual, not relaxation. You are sitting at the edge of the known world, right where the manicured lawn ends and the impenetrable darkness begins. And Finn has just reminded you of your mortality. The stage is set for the actual horror to start. The macabre joke about the pine wood coffin settles in the air, a thick, unsettling layer of silence that the crackling fire can't quite burn away. You feel the tension building, but you tell yourself it's just Finn being Finn. He's deliberately manufacturing this spooky campfire mood. You are an audience of one, and he is a master of the chilling preamble. Then a sound. It's abrupt, piercing, and entirely out of place. It cuts through the background noise of the night, the gentle hiss of the burning logs, the distant, faint thrum of the city a few miles away. It sounds, terrifyingly, exactly like a woman screaming. It's a high-pitched, drawn-out shriek, full of panic and despair, seeming to originate from deep within the blackness of the woods, just beyond the fence. You jump, scanning the perimeter, your heart hammering against your ribs. "What the heck was that?" you whisper, the fear instantly making your voice small. You feel a genuine wave of panic, a primal urge to bolt for the safety of the lit house. Your mind immediately goes to the worst human scenario: a lost hiker, an attack, an emergency, because the sound is so profoundly, distressingly human in its tone. Finn doesn't even flinch. He just leans back on the log, perfectly composed, the firelight catching the dismissive smirk on his face. "Ah, that's just an old screech owl," he says with an almost bored certainty. He tells you not to worry about it, that the forest is full of sounds that only seem alarming. But then he pivots, moving from dismissal to escalation. His voice drops into that soft, conspiratorial ASMR tone again. "I've seen things and heard things out in the woods that would really scare you," he says, his eyes gleaming as he looks past you, toward the dark tree line. He starts listing them, a litany of unsettling natural encounters. Beetles the size of your fist, big enough to make a sickening crunch if you stepped on them. Wandering, hungry coyotes that had completely lost their fear of humans and would stare you down without blinking. For some reason, this doesn't calm your nerves. It makes things worse. The screech owl may be just an owl, but the image of giant, silent beetles and fearless predators only increases your general sense of vulnerability. It's an odd fact that the brain struggles to distinguish between high-frequency distress calls. The acoustic startle reflex is triggered most easily by sudden, high-pitched noises, which is why the sound of a screech owl can be misinterpreted by the human auditory cortex as a woman screaming. It's a survival mechanism, a mistake your brain makes to keep you alive. Then, Finn's entire demeanor changes. The snarky grin vanishes. He looks at you with a dead serious expression, his eyes unwavering, and asks the question that you know is the entire point of the evening. You want to know about the weirdest thing I've ever run into out there. Your father, the chief, who has been quietly stoking the fire, and you know there's no stopping him now. The request for agreement is merely a formality. You both agree, pulling the circle tighter, leaning in. The stage is perfectly set. This moment, you realize, is a piece of real-world horror folklore, the ancient tradition of the Murch or wild man stories, which were warnings passed down in medieval Europe about the untamed, monstrous humanoids that lived just outside the village borders. Researchers still argue whether these tales were exaggerated encounters with escaped mental patients, isolated criminals, or early, poorly documented encounters with large, unknown primates. But the function is always the same: to draw a hard line between civilization and the dangerous wild. Finn is about to tell you exactly where that line is. And more terrifyingly, he's about to tell you that something crossed it. The transformation is complete. Finn is no longer the casual jokester. He is the quiet, calm narrator of his own personal terror. His voice, still low, now possesses the gravity of someone who has genuinely stared into the void. Well, it was out in that national forest just north of here. He begins, specifying the location that you had already mentally associated with his earlier, vague story. He tells you he was doing a mundane chore, out after dark collecting firewood, a routine task for a woodsman. The forest was silent, he recalls, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but waiting. Then the noise starts a rhythm, a peculiar sound that he couldn't initially identify. It was a distinctive knocking sound, a hollow, resonant impact, as if someone was deliberately and forcefully hitting a stick or a heavy piece of bone up against a tree trunk. Thud, thud, pause, thud. It sounded methodical, almost like a strange, coded signal, not the random cracking of ice or the fall of a branch. This knocking, he says, unnerved him immediately. He froze, listening intently. It was too intentional to be an animal. But what followed was far worse. He describes an extremely loud, non-human sound, a noise that instantly made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, sending a cold spike of adrenaline down his spine. He realized in that moment that he was hearing an animal, but an animal he had never, in decades of working in the deep woods, ever encountered before. The sound, he whispers, was a deep, resonating whooping call, a cry of enormous volume, like that of a very large, powerful ape. It wasn't a roar of anger, but a communication, a primal, territorial vocalization that seemed to vibrate in his very chest cavity. It's an odd fact that infrasound, very low-frequency sound waves below the range of human hearing, are sometimes generated by large animals like elephants and alligators, while Finn heard the whooping. The low-frequency vibrations that accompany the whoop can induce feelings of dread, anxiety, and the sense of an unseen presence in humans. Even without conscious auditory awareness, this physiological response might explain the immediate, overwhelming terror he felt. He recounts the moment he looked into the dark. The whooping stopped, and in the sudden, crushing silence, he saw them. Two sets of glowing orange eyes. They were not reflective, like a deer's eyes in a headlight. They seemed to emit their own low, burning light. A pair of self-illuminated orbs floating in the blackness. He instinctively raised his flashlight, aiming the beam directly at the glowing dots. What the beam revealed was a nightmare. An 8-foot-tall creature standing perfectly upright. It looked like a man, but was thickly covered in dark brown hair, massive and imposing. Finn didn't hesitate. The creature let out another one of those deep, resonant whooping cries, and he broke all sense of composure, immediately booking it out of there. "I never ran so fast in my life," he says, his voice hoarse. The finality in his tone is absolute. Never seen anything like it, and I hope I never do again. The whole story hangs in the air, heavy and solid. You and your father are completely silent, hanging on every word. You are visibly tense, your muscles coiled. The earlier fear of the screech owl completely forgotten, replaced by a much colder, deeper terror. This is a real-world horror reference. The SASQUATCH vocalizations are a well-documented piece of cryptozoological folklore, with reports consistently mentioning the wood knocking and the high-volume, resonant whoops as key identifiers of the creature. Researchers still argue whether these sounds are truly distinct from known wildlife or merely misinterpretations of bears, wind effects, or even elaborate hoaxes. The campfire story is over, and the ending is terrifyingly real. The immediate aftermath of Finn's story is a profound, shared silence. You and the chief are statues, completely absorbed by the image of that 8-foot-tall, upright, hairy figure standing under the beam of a flashlight. The initial comfort of the fire is gone, replaced by a sudden, frantic vulnerability. The vast, safe darkness of your own backyard, usually a blanket of familiar comfort, is now a menacing void, an immediate extension of the national forest where that creature lives. You don't spend much longer sitting there. The atmosphere is ruined, the convivial glow of the fire extinguished by cold, primal fear, and you quickly gather your things and head back inside. The walk from the fire pit to the back door, a distance you've navigated thousands of times, feels like crossing a hostile border. You instinctively glance back at the tree line, half expecting to see two sets of glowing orange eyes watching you retreat. Finn, sensing the victory, the sheer terror he has induced, laughs a loud, slightly maniacal sound that rings falsely in the silent night. See, not so worried about that screech owl now, huh? He challenges, finding amusement in your collective fear. His laughter only makes the terror worse. It feels like the jester's final flourish before the serious act begins. But once inside the safety of the house, With the door bolted, skepticism begins to creep back in. You settle in for the night, the vivid images of the creature slowly giving way to rational thought. You tell yourself that this is exactly what a campfire story is supposed to be, an elaborate, perfectly timed narrative designed to scare the audience. Finn is a master storyteller. His reliability in real life might just translate into a convincing ability to lie. You begin to theorize, searching for a comfortable, logical explanation. Perhaps, you muse, Finn did see something large. Maybe it was an exceptionally big black bear, standing on its hind legs to get a scent or a vantage point. Its massive shape obscured by the darkness. A bear standing in the low light and mist could easily be mistaken for something more monstrous by even an experienced outdoorsman. It seems far more probable that an avid woodsman made an honest, fear-induced mistake than that a massive, unknown primate species is roaming the North American woods. Researchers still argue whether the famous Patterson-Gimlin film simply captured a very convincing man in a suit or a genuine, if blurry, piece of evidence for a massive, bipedal ape. The human need for rational explanation is a powerful anesthetic against fear. This need to rationalize is rooted in a fascinating, eerie psychological fact. Pareidolia. This is the phenomenon where your brain perceives recognizable patterns like faces, figures, or intentional sounds in random or ambiguous stimuli. The combination of darkness, fear, the suggestibility of a campfire story, and the ambiguous form of a bear or other large animal creates the perfect mental storm for Finn's brain to construct an 8-foot-tall Sasquatch. You tell yourself that his experience was real to him, but the interpretation was flawed. Yet, this internal debate, this desperate attempt to be the skeptic, doesn't bring peace. The emotional weight of the story is too heavy. Finn's sincerity, his reliable nature, acts like a real-world horror counterpoint to your skepticism. The phenomenon of eyewitness testimony. Countless legal cases hinge on the certainty of one person's memory, even when the evidence is circumstantial. Finn's conviction is the evidence. You realize you cannot simply trust Finn's account, nor can you completely dismiss it. The uncertainty itself is the torture. You have to know for yourself the rational, skeptical part of your mind is suddenly overpowered by a compulsive, burning need for definitive proof to either confirm the bear or confirm the monster. The search for a rational answer is, ironically, leading you right back into the dark. In the weeks that follow Finn's visit, the burning need for confirmation becomes an obsession. The rational part of your brain is still telling you it was a bear, a trick of the light, an elaborate hoax. But the primal, terrified part refuses to let go. You find yourself gazing out the window at the familiar tree line, seeing the darkness as an invitation, or perhaps a challenge. You feel compelled to go to the source, to the national forest just north of the city where Finn supposedly had his encounter. This is, you acknowledge now, one of the most significant and foolish mistakes you've ever made. Rationality, in that moment, yielded to an utterly human desire for truth, regardless of the danger. You prepare for the expedition with a strange mixture of dread and boyish excitement, the latter a remnant of those childhood camping ventures. You load up your father's old pickup truck. It's a battered, mud-covered machine, already possessing the aesthetic of a vehicle used for deep woods exploration. The only piece of equipment you truly deem essential is a small, high-quality digital camera, which you sling around your neck. Your intention is to document whatever you see: a large bear, a funny-looking owl, or, against all logic, a creature of myth. The camera is your shield and your proof. As you drive, you realize that the search itself is an act of real-world horror. You are mimicking the behavior of countless missing persons who ventured into the wilderness seeking answers or adventure and were never seen again. This investigative step is the exact moment you leave the safety of the narrative and become a potential case file. The drive is long and isolating. You leave the manicured highways for narrow, gravel backroads. As you get closer to the national forest, the air grows heavier, the sky darker, and the sense of isolation more profound. It's an odd fact that the Mothman sightings and other cryptid accounts often occur near power plants or specific geological features. Researchers still argue whether this is due to electromagnetic interference causing temporary hallucinations, or if these locations simply attract a higher volume of inquisitive individuals. Regardless, your chosen location, remote, vast, and already stained by Finn's tail, feels magnetically charged. You park the truck, pulling off the gravel road onto a tiny, unmarked turnout, a location so quiet it feels like the rest of the world has ceased to exist. You step out of the cab, and immediately the environment asserts its dominance. Above you, the canopy is already a riot of autumn color, a stunning, violent variety of reds, golds, and burnt oranges. It's beautiful, yes, but also overwhelming. A massive, unbroken roof that blocks out the sky and holds the impending darkness close. You start to walk, crunching over the fallen leaves. A bizarre, almost palpable feeling settles on you, walking alongside you like an invisible companion. It's not fear yet, not panic, but a deep, cold uneasiness. It's the feeling of being an intruder, of stepping into a territory that actively resents your presence. You know, deep down, that you are fulfilling a dangerous trope, the unwary investigator, the one who should have listened to the warning. But you continue to walk, driven by the need to replace theory with evidence, to replace Finn's voice with your own undeniable truth. You have entered the monster's house. You have stepped through the door. You are deep inside the woods now, and the sun is losing its battle with the horizon. The vibrant autumn colors of the canopy begin to dim, and your surroundings are slowly, inexorably, taking on a uniform blue tint the blue hour. This is the hour when the visual world loses its sharp definition, when shadows lengthen into impossible shapes, and when your own mind, struggling to make sense of the low light, begins to fill the blanks with dread. You walk through the forest with a profound and growing uneasiness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig makes you jump. The silence between the sounds is worse. It feels like the whole environment is holding its breath, waiting. You feel a relentless, heavy pressure on your back, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. You imagine 1,000 eyes on you, hidden deep within the undergrowth, behind the thick, striated bark of the trees, patiently tracking your every step. You know this is just anxiety, but it feels intensely real, a physical weight on your shoulders. The fall wind drifts through the environment. It's a cold, sighing sound that shivers across the vast, leaf-quilted forest floor. This rustling, usually comforting, now sounds like movement, the slow, careful steps of something enormous dragging itself closer. It's an odd fact that the unsettling feeling of being watched is often a result of something called scopophobia, an extreme fear of being seen or stared at. However, it's also a highly refined evolutionary trait, the ability to sense a threat even when it's just outside the visual field. This primitive survival instinct, which allowed your ancestors to avoid predators, is now in overdrive, whispering that your life is in danger. Then the manufactured tension of the evening snaps into terrifying reality. A sound. It is sudden, sharp, and entirely unmistakable. A knocking sound. It's hollow, a purposeful, clean tap on the side of a far-off tree trunk. Thud, thud. It doesn't echo. It simply resonates in the heavy, cold air. It is exactly as Finn described wooden in tone, resonant, and entirely intentional. You stop instantly, your entire body locked in place. The cold fear from that night by the campfire returns. Only now, there is no fire, no father, and no door to bolt shut. There is only the vast, indifferent forest. You take a single, hesitant step forward, a foolish move driven by the last vestige of your investigator's curiosity. And then it happens again. A distinct, resonant knock, equally wooden and deliberate, breaks the renewed silence. This isn't the wind. This isn't a falling branch. And this is certainly not a bear. It's a communication. It's a signal. The thing that is knocking knows you are here. This use of sound as a territorial marker is a piece of real-world horror and a consistent element in the Falk monster and other cryptid legends. The creatures are often reported to use these knocks as a form of communication or intimidation, sometimes called wood knocking, which researchers still argue may be a learned, intentional behavior or a natural sound misinterpreted by fearful witnesses. Your heart pounds so hard it feels like a physical percussion inside your chest, matching the rhythm of the wooden thud. You know, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that you have found what you came for. The skepticism, has been annihilated by the sound of wood striking wood. The wood knocking, that singular, chilling sound, is enough to paralyze you. It's the sound of certainty, the death knell of your carefully constructed skepticism. But the universe, it seems, insists on giving you the full, terrifying confirmation. What follows the knocking is a sound that tears through the twilight, a sound that is both profoundly animal and impossibly human. It is a loud, guttural whooping sound. It is a deep, resonating vocalization that sends not just shivers, but genuine spikes of ice down your spine. It is a sound of raw, enormous power, a terrifying, primal call. It is exactly, precisely, terrifyingly, as Finn described it. The low, booming texture, the incredible volume, the unmistakable quality of a very large, non-human primate asserting its presence. The sound confirms everything he told you: the knocking, the size, the sheer, undeniable reality of the creature's existence. The investigator in you is instantly, brutally murdered by the survivor. You don't pause to analyze the frequency, the decibel level, or the biological source. You don't try to shine your flashlight, and you certainly don't think about the camera hanging uselessly around your neck. All higher-order thought ceases. You are reduced to pure, white-hot, terrified reflex. You run. Like Finn before you, you bolt right out of there, turning heel and sprinting down the dimming trail. You run blindly, driven by a fear so profound it's almost spiritual. The sound of your own frantic breathing and the pounding of your boots on the leaf-quilted forest floor is the only measure of time. You don't care about dignity, proof, or the scientific method. You care only about distance and the comforting metal shell of your father's old pickup truck. You are running from the sound itself, from the certainty that you have just been targeted, that your presence has been noted and broadcast through the wood line. This moment, this complete surrender to terror, is a callback to a terrifying piece of real-world horror folklore. The stalker phenomenon, reported by remote campers and hikers, where witnesses describe hearing the purposeful, heavy, bipedal footsteps of a creature pacing their perimeter. Never seen, only heard. Researchers still argue whether these are genuine encounters with cryptids or a combination of auditory hallucinations exacerbated by fear and misinterpretation of large animals like moose or bears. But in your experience, the sound was too specific, too purposeful. You burst out of the tree line and immediately spot the truck. The relief is instantaneous, but quickly replaced by the knowledge that the creature knows where you parked. You yank the door open, fumble the key into the ignition, and slam the accelerator down, spraying gravel and mud as you peel out onto the empty back road. You didn't see what made the sounds. You didn't get the photo or the video or the sound recording. You failed the investigator's mission, but you succeed in the survivor's mission. And in that failure, you find a truth that is far more chilling than any visual proof could have been. You know, with absolute certainty, there is something massive out there. It's an odd fact that fear can momentarily disable the visual memory centers of the brain. When the amygdala detects a life-threatening stimulus, it prioritizes immediate action, running over detailed documentation, using the camera. This phenomenon, known as tunnel vision or perceptual narrowing, explains why you didn't even think to lift the camera. Your brain saved your life at the expense of your proof. You know that the creature is not quite human, but it is not simply an animal either. It uses tools, wood knocking, and it communicates with resonant calls. You can't prove it to the world, but at least you know the terrible truth for yourself. The drive home is not a return to safety. It is merely an extension of the terror. You grip the steering wheel so tightly your knuckles are white, and your foot is heavy on the gas pedal. The truth you just confirmed is a massive, cold stone of dread in your stomach. You had to know, and now you do. You are no longer skeptical. You are simply terrified. All the way home, you are absolutely convinced you are not alone. The chilling feeling of being watched, which had started as a vague anxiety in the woods, has now become a persistent, unsettling reality. You feel them, or it, shadowing you. Your eyes gaze worriedly at the trees lining the road on either side. In the dim glow of your truck's headlights, the forest becomes a chaotic, constantly shifting landscape of shadows and looming trunks. Every dark shape at the edge of the road, every flicker of reflected light, your mind instantly converts into the towering, dark brown, upright creature that Finn described. The paranoia is a low, buzzing hum that you cannot turn off. You can't shake the feeling. You glance constantly into the side mirrors, expecting to see a huge, dark shape keeping pace with your truck, moving just behind the veil of the woods. You check the rearview mirror, convinced you will see two glowing orange eyes reflecting the taillights. This is an eerie psychological fact. The omen of the road, the belief that a supernatural entity is following you on a lonely stretch of highway, is a common fear. Researchers still argue whether this is simply a byproduct of road hypnosis, or if it's a residual fear from the time when human travel was inherently dangerous and prone to predator attack. You are living that ancient fear. You realize that this relentless scrutiny, this sense of pursuit, is its own form of real-world horror, a specific kind of psychological torture. It mirrors the feeling reported by victims of real-life stalking. The knowledge that someone is dedicating their life to observing yours, erasing the boundary between your private space and the hostile exterior. The forest has not released you. It has merely extended its domain to the road you are traveling. The relief only comes when you finally pull into your own driveway. The sudden presence of familiar lights, the solid structure of your home, and the faint, domestic sounds of the neighborhood act like a psychic shield. The moment the tires crunch onto the familiar asphalt, the oppressive weight of being watched lifts, but only slightly. You are home, but the truth you confirmed in the woods has followed you here. You pull the truck into the garage, lock the door, and walk into the house, your body still shaking from the adrenaline dump. You go straight to bed. You don't even bother to share the night's horrifying confirmation with your father. The experience feels too raw, too deeply personal, and too utterly unbelievable to articulate. What would you even say? The wood knocking was real, Dad. Finn was right. We have a monster next door. You realize you don't feel like telling anyone about your experience. It's a terrifying secret that now binds you to the creature in the woods. You are its only confidant. You lie in bed, rigid and awake. You feel like you've crossed a line, a boundary of knowledge that cannot be uncrossed. You didn't just find the creature, you alerted it to your presence. You went to its home, and now it knows where you live. This thought is the only thing that occupies your mind as you wait for sleep that will not come. Sleep remains an impossible luxury. You lie rigid in the darkness, waiting, listening, processing the wood knocking and the guttural whooping, every creak of the house, every movement of the old pipes becomes a potential sign of intrusion. The knowledge of the creature's existence is a heavy weight pressing down on your chest. Hours later, sometime deep in the dead center of the night, a sound from the backyard shatters the fragile silence of your fear. It is not the subtle snap of a twig or the distant whoop of a cryptid. It is a definite, unmistakable sound of something large moving, or perhaps even standing right at the edge of the manicured lawn. The sound is close, too close. Adrenaline floods your system again. Every instinct screams at you to stay still, to hide under the covers, and pretend you didn't hear it. But the same burning, foolish compulsion that drove you into the national forest takes over. You have to know. You grab your flashlight, a powerful, heavy-duty beam from the bedside table. The beam feels cold and insufficient in your hand, but it is your only weapon. You walk with slow, deliberate steps toward the back door, then out onto the back porch. The cold night air hits you, a sharp, unwelcome shock. The backyard is pitch black, the darkness intensified by the light spilling from your door. The vast, black opening of the woods looms just beyond the fence line, a wall of pure night that suddenly feels like a gaping maw. You raise your head, scanning the darkness, and then you see them. To your utter, paralyzing horror, there is a pair of bright, glowing orange eyes. They are floating at the very edge of the woods, right where the familiar grass ends and the wild begins. They are the exact, burning color Finn described. They are stationary, focused, and utterly silent. They are home. You hover the beam of your powerful flashlight over the glowing eyes, fighting the instinct to lower the light and hide. As the beam illuminates the scene, the form attached to the eyes snaps into focus. A large, hairy creature, standing eerily still. It is 8 feet of dense, dark brown hair and massive muscle, standing upright between the trees. It is looking directly at you. The shock isn't just the sight, but the expression. It has an almost human expression. It's not a snarl of aggression or the blank stare of a cow. It's an expression of bewilderment, curiosity, and intense focus. The ape creature, you realize, looks just as amazed by you as you are by him. It's an odd fact that the wild man legends throughout history often describe the creature's face as being uncannily human, leading to the eerie psychological effect of the uncanny valley again. The creature is too like you to be dismissed as a simple animal, but too alien to be called human. He studies you curiously from across the yard. The way he holds his head, the stillness of his posture, suggests he is utterly amazed by your very existence. You are the cryptid to him. You are the anomaly he has followed home. You are the strange, delicate, hairless thing that drives a loud metal box and then retreats to a brightly lit, square den. This moment is a piece of real-world horror, reflecting the close encounter of the third kind experience in UFO lore, where the terror is mixed with a profound sense of mutual astonishment. Researchers still argue whether the sense of mutual study is a genuine interaction or a psychological projection of the witness trying to rationalize the impossible encounter. For you, there is no argument. You are being observed, and the observer is enormous. The creature's gaze is a heavy, silent question. And then, the silence is broken by a sudden, terrifying realization. The single creature, with its enormous, curious gaze, is terrifying enough. But the silence that follows his study is suddenly shattered by a much more profound, chilling revelation. He is not alone as you stand frozen on the porch, staring into the bright, orange eyes of the first creature. The darkness around him comes alive. 4 other sets of eyes suddenly blink into existence, appearing in the thicket beside and behind the first one. They are not all the same burning orange. You see pairs of eyes in vivid, startling colors: green, red, and yellow. The colors are shocking against the blackness, like a macabre Christmas light display. Only each light is the intense, focused gaze of a massive, silent animal. This is no solitary wanderer. This is a group of Sasquatch. They are a family, a patrol, a curious clan, and they are all gathered at the very edge of your property. The realization hits you with the force of a physical blow. You did not simply encounter a creature in the forest. You alerted the whole community to your existence and led them directly back to your home. The initial terror morphs into a profound, suffocating dread. You are surrounded, not by a threat of attack, but by the chilling, collective scrutiny of an entire, unknown species. They simply stare at you for a long, unbearable moment. The silence is more frightening than any sound. It is the sound of 5 massive beings deciding what you are. This collective observation is an odd, eerie fact in psychological horror, the concept of the witness effect, where a feeling of deep vulnerability and intense scrutiny is created by multiple, silent observers. Research shows that people are more likely to exhibit anxiety and self-consciousness when they believe they are being watched by more than one entity. Even if those entities are inanimate or imaginary, here they are terrifyingly real. Then the decision is made. The silence is ripped apart as the group, almost in unison, unleashes an ungodly sound. It is not a whoop this time, not a knock, but a terrible, chaotic cacophony of deep, resonant sounds, a blend of guttural roars, high-pitched shrieks, and profound, chest-rattling bellows. It sounds like a chorus of the abyss, a terrifying affirmation of their presence, and a forceful, undeniable declaration of territorial ownership. The sound seems to vibrate through the very foundation of the house. The noise is the final straw. All vestiges of the intrepid investigator are gone. You move instantly, your feet moving faster than thought, retreating from the porch. You scramble back inside and slam the door shut, throwing the bolt home with a shaking, frantic hand. The sound of the latch clicking is the only measure of safety you have left. You press your back against the door, breathing heavily, listening. You wait for the sound to continue, for the creatures to charge the porch, but the ungodly noise gradually fades. The glowing eyes, orange, green, red, and yellow, eventually blink out, one by one, disappearing back into the impenetrable darkness of the woods behind your house. They simply retreat, having made their presence known. This retreat is a specific real-world horror reference. The chilling demon on the porch trope, found in many Appalachian and Native American folklore stories, where the creature approaches the home, makes a tremendous, terrifying sound, and then retreats without causing physical damage. Researchers still argue whether this is a learned intimidation display by large animals or a cultural explanation for terrifying, localized acoustic phenomena. You didn't get any sleep that night. You didn't even return to bed to lie down. You just sat upright, hunched in a chair, staring out the window, watching the dark rectangle of the backyard, and waiting for their inevitable return. You know they are still out there, and you know they know you are here. The morning light, when it finally arrives, does not bring comfort. It only brings clarity. You spent the entire night in a state of hypervigilance, staring out the window. The sun now illuminates the backyard, transforming the black void back into familiar grass and fence line. But the familiarity is poisoned by what you know. You are moving like a ghost, exhausted and hollowed out by fear. The house feels less like a sanctuary and more like a flimsy observation blind. You eventually force yourself to go outside, to face the scene of the night's terror. You have to know if it was a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and suggestion, or if the evidence is still there. You walk slowly across the lawn toward the edge of the woods, where the group of glowing eyes had gathered. The grass is damp with dew, and a thin layer of early morning mist still clings to the shaded area near the trees. You reach the fence line and stop. The air is calm. The forest is quiet. You are almost starting to convince yourself that the whole thing, the screams, the knocks, the glowing eyes, was a psychological break. You look down. Yesterday, your backyard was just a yard. This morning, it is a crime scene, or rather, a terrifying piece of evidence. You find a series of enormous, unmistakable footprints. They are massive impressions pressed deeply into the damp earth, slightly softened by the night's dew. The footprints are larger than any person could possibly make. They are wide, with a defined heel and toes, leaving clear, large barefoot impressions in the soft mud where the lawn meets the undergrowth. You kneel down, holding your hand against the deepest part of one impression, and the size discrepancy is horrifying. You could fit your entire hand inside the print with room to spare. This isn't a boot print or a hoax. It is the impression of enormous, unshoed footfall. The discovery annihilates the last, lingering shred of your skepticism. There is no question in your mind now. There is no possible debate, no ambiguity left to exploit. The evidence is undeniable. There are bizarre, ape-like creatures living in the woods behind your house. The woods you played in, the woods you slept in, the woods you called home. It's an odd fact that hominid skeletal reconstruction indicates that bipedal locomotion requires a specific foot structure. The consistently reported size and shape of these large bipedal prints, wider than human, sometimes showing a mid-foot break, are what make them so controversial. Researchers still argue whether the consistency of the hundreds of reported track finds points to a genuine biological consistency, or simply a shared cultural template. For you kneeling in the mud, the print is solid biological proof. This single massive footprint is a tangible piece of real-world horror. It's the artifact left behind by the creature in countless Native American tales of the stick Indians or Bushmen, creatures that use mimicry and physical signs to instill fear. Finn and you have both seen them now, and you know with terrible certainty that countless others have as well. You realize the profound change that has occurred. You are not saying you believe all the wild stories of SASQUATCH, the glowing powers, the interdimensional travel, but you know that the fundamental truth is real. There are people out there who have actually witnessed these creatures, and they are the only ones who truly know what you are talking about. You stand up, brushing the dirt from your knees, and look out over your beautiful, normal backyard. You know it's a terrifying miscalculation to think of this as just a spooky story. This is not a campfire tale, because the fire is out, the night is over, and the evidence is pressed into your own lawn. The discovery of the footprints changes everything about your perception of your home. The house is no longer a sanctuary, it's a target. You go through the motions of your day, but you are a hollow shell, constantly listening, constantly checking the windows. You are now living in a state of suspended dread, the air thick with the certainty of their presence. You internalize the truth you have found, accepting it as fact. They are out there, but the real, soul-crushing terror isn't just the seeing, it's the chilling, inverted truth. They've seen you, You are no longer the observer. You are the observed. You are the subject of their curiosity, the thing that has broken the natural order by coming to their home, and then leading them to yours. You realize the profound implications of Finn's story and your subsequent actions. That initial drive into the woods, that search for proof, was the fatal step. You have confirmed their existence, but in doing so, you have entered into a dangerous, asymmetrical relationship. You now know their deepest secret, and they now know your most basic routine. You know, with a cold certainty that settles deep in your bones, that the encounter was not a coincidence. They followed you from the moment you turned the truck around and sped away from that unsettling whooping call. They were tracking you. This is a deep-seated, real-world horror. The fear of the shadowing entity, often featured in urban legends, where a malevolent spirit or creature follows the witness home from a haunted location. Researchers still argue whether this is a manifestation of post-traumatic stress, the brain replaying the threat in familiar settings, or a psychological mechanism that externalizes the internal fear, creating a focus for the anxiety. For you, the evidence is in the mud. They shadowed you from behind the trees on either side of the road, keeping pace with your speeding vehicle. The paranoia you felt during the drive home, the constant checking of the mirrors, was not anxiety. It was their actual, deliberate movement. They came back with you to your home to live. Your property, your private space, is now shared territory, and you were the one who invited them in. This new reality forces a complete shift in your self-perception. You suddenly know what it's like to be an undiscovered animal, spotted for the first time by a much more powerful, curious species. You are the zoo exhibit, and the fence line is merely the railing. It's an odd fact that animal camouflage experts have noted that one of the most effective forms of concealment is to remain absolutely still, in plain sight, mimicking a natural object. The massive creature you saw standing eerily still between the trees, looking at you with that curious, almost human expression, was employing a highly effective predatory or defensive technique. You know what it's like now to be studied from a distance. You feel the pressure of their gaze, even when you can't see the glowing eyes. You are a biological specimen under observation. Your habits, your schedule, and your vulnerabilities being cataloged in the deep, silent language of the woods. The final, suffocating thought arrives, a realization of complete powerlessness. There is absolutely nothing you can do to stop this. You are trapped by their superior numbers, their size, and their stealth. The terror of the whoop and the knock is replaced by the quiet dread of total exposure. The line between your world and theirs is erased. The final, chilling section is a descent into cold, sustained paranoia. The fear is no longer adrenaline-fueled. It's a quiet, crushing certainty that colors every waking moment. You no longer worry about if they will come back, but when and why. You live your life based on the fact that you are always being watched. You understand now, with terrible clarity, the concept of a haunted life. It's not the house that's haunted, it's you. The house is simply the new center of the haunting, the focal point of their surveillance. The entire backyard, once a symbol of domestic tranquility, is now a silent border zone, a place where two worlds meet and silently observe one another. You realize that your initial skepticism, your need for empirical proof, was the catalyst for your own demise. You wanted to prove it wasn't true, but instead, you simply confirmed the danger and drew it to your door. You are now tied to them, and they are tied to you. The core of your terror is the knowledge that they know where you are. This is the ultimate invasion of privacy. You can lock the doors, close the blinds, and turn on every light, but you cannot hide. They possess a knowledge that gives them complete power over your peace of mind. This deep, intrusive paranoia is an odd, eerie fact known as the Truman Show delusion, a psychological condition where the afflicted person believes their life is a staged reality show, and that they are constantly being monitored by cameras and a large audience. Researchers still argue whether this delusion is a form of environmental misinterpretation or a deep-seated narcissism. But the feeling of relentless, invisible surveillance is exactly what you are experiencing. Every rustle of a leaf is a cameraman adjusting his position. They know you are here now. That is the final, undisputed fact. That is the new cornerstone of your reality. Your existence, your small, quiet life, has been registered, cataloged, and deemed worthy of continuous observation by a secretive, massive species living in the wild. You think back to all the little things that seemed random. The missing bag of compost from the garage, the strange, deep scrape mark on the old wooden fence post, the smell of musk on a cold morning. None of it was random. It was all them, quietly settling in, establishing their new, permanent observation post. Your life is now a piece of real-world horror, a living, missing 411 case that has been inverted. You haven't gone missing into the woods. The woods have followed you home and are waiting for the final chapter. Researchers still argue whether the consistent patterns in missing persons cases, the sudden disappearances, the strange locations, the unusual clothing issues point to a common, organized, non-human agency, or simply the predictable chaos of search and rescue operations. For you, the pattern is now clear. The creatures follow, they observe, and eventually, the line between observer and observed breaks down. You walk to the window again. The backyard is empty, silent, waiting. But the silence doesn't soothe. It only means they are being careful. They are masters of stealth, of movement that makes no sound. They have nowhere else to go, and now neither do you. You are the subject of their study. You are their discovery, and you are their prisoner. The screen fades to black. The deep, resonant voice softens, pulling you gently away from the window, away from the terror. I know that was a lot. Take a moment now to breathe, to feel the solid floor beneath your feet and the air in your lungs. the lights are off, but I want you to know that the candle is still burning, the flame steady, and the walls of your room are strong. The sounds you hear now are just the gentle settling of your house, the distant traffic, the comforting hum of life continuing all around you. Remember that the fear we explore here is just a story, a manufactured dread that we build together in the dark. It is a story designed to make you feel the profound relief of turning a light on, of knowing that the glowing eyes belong to the toys on your shelf, or the standby light on your charging phone. The real world is still just outside your door, and it is still a place of reason, skepticism, and human connection. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and letting me whisper this terrifying tale into the silence. You're incredibly brave to face this kind of psychological horror with me. If you enjoyed the ride, or if you simply made it to the end, please remember to hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that we survived the night. Share this with a friend who needs a good, deep shiver. Until next time, be well, be safe, and check the lock on your back door just in case. Sleep peacefully if you can. Sources.